Okay.
Welcome to episode 58. March Madness has begun, and so has this show. I'm Mike, alongside with
Daniel.
Oops, I forgot to unmute. Vincent and special guest Spawn.
For the audio listeners, Vince got delivered the crowdfunded remake of the very first Spawn figure that McFarlane did. It's a very nice figure, very high quality. But gentlemen, March Madness has begun as we started off our show. Vince, I think your bracket's already gone. Well, everyone's bracket's busted with Oral Roberts beating Ohio State this afternoon. But outside of that, how are you doing this week? The Snyder Cut came out. I watched it, and it was terrible. I'll do another thing on that sometime elsewhere. But other than that, my week was all right.
Mine was busy.
Pretty much same. Mine was long, very arduous. Kind of like the process for fans to finally get the Snyder Cut in their lives.
And then the long process of watching it because it was 4 hours long.
All the sweeter when you factor in all the hard fought battles on Twitter that were conducted over the years.
Still haven't watched the original Justice League, so shame on me.
You can watch a bad movie that's 2 hours long or a bad movie that's 4 hours long.
I think I should just do a marathon of both of them.
Don't do that to yourself. All right. It was a busy week. I'll hop right in and start off the show with Nightwing 78. It was the big release this week. It was the big hyped release kind of since they announced the creative team for Infinite Frontier. This is Tom Taylor, Bruno Redondo, and Adriano Lucas. New era, new creative team for the fan favorite Batman sidekick. Tom Taylor, Bruno Redondo are looking to bring back some of that fun energy to Nightwing. As for like the last year and a half, he was stuck in that kind of awful status quo of Rick Grayson, who was like had amnesia and was driving a cab around Gotham City. So we got all rid of that. We're back to basics here. Opening a flashback of Dick Grayson saying how he doesn't like bullies as he's defending a kid. And also a young Barbara Gordon's there, and he gets a police escort back to Wayne Manor. And I guess this is framed as Barbara's first meeting of Rick. No, not of Dick Grayson. But I know that Batman, or I think it's Robin year one, he sees her the first time on a rooftop with Gordon, and there's a fun moment there. But pretty good bonding moment here between Dick and Alfred, as when he enters, he finishes drying the dishes Alfred was doing because he doesn't feel like he should do it all himself. And then Alfred tells him he's like proud of that he stands up to people even outside the suit. Bruce wasn't there when he was like brought home, but flash forward to today, and Nightwing's back in Bloodhaven. He's fighting a gang and saving a stray dog who's most likely taking in. That's definitely a setup thing here. But at his apartment, Barbara's there, and she's broken in to share with him the news of his inheritance that he's getting from Alfred, because remember, Alfred died at the climax of the Tom King Batman run. And then we haven't really done anything with the fallout from it, really, that much, other than Bruce has lost his fortune, but that was a Joker War thing. And also when that happened, he was, if you remember that like Alfred Rest in Peace one shot, he was Rick Grayson in that. So he showed up at that bar for 5 seconds and just left. But he learns that Alfred leaves him quite the fortune, and knowing that he will put it to good use. So we also see Blockbuster taking out the mayor with the help of the police commissioner and like the mayor's aide as he's building his empire. And he instills this new mayor who is the daughter of Tony Zuko, which looks to destroy Nightwing. I love the tone here, in the colors by Adriano Lucas, so expressive and like perfect for this more fun and energetic superhero vibe that Taylor's going for. Bruno Redondo kind of has a Mikhail Janin vibe to the art, but totally all his own, with the different shading on faces and whatnot, and the energetic expressions of the action scenes. And it really sets it apart from any of the other Batman books, because they all have that dark color palette. Well, this is like very bright with like kind of blues and pinks, which give a different vibe to Bloodhaven as well, which is the different Bloodhaven from what I've seen before. But I like the new dimension of it. Easily one of the most hype books for Infinite Frontier, and I think it does what you set out to do in a first issue, which back to bases, set the status quo, and here's some light setup of things to come. But I'm pretty excited wholeheartedly for what Tom Taylor's going to do with Nightwing here.
Yeah, I'll definitely be staying on this book. This is definitely a really nice start, for a restart, I guess, for me to kind of get to know this character more. Yeah, I really like the panel too, like the little like half splash page here where he's kind of like fighting the goons, and he's like, you see like his blue outline of him jumping around. I think that's a really cool art choice there. But yeah, I feel like a lot of what sells me on this book is definitely the art. It's top notch. Yeah, really not much else to say.
I love the opening flashback stuff. Like Mike said, I think this is a slightly tweaked version of Dick and Barbara's early relationship, but like, who cares at this point?
Yeah.
Their chemistry in the present is perfect as well. The art is phenomenal. A lot of that I think is on the coloring for sure. The dog introduction is like pretty emotionally manipulative, and the fact with the dog, the dog in peril, missing a leg, and then you get a couple panels as well where it's like a close up on Dick using his stick. Like both Tom Taylor and the artist literally just ripped a page out of David Aja's playbook for the Fraction and Aja's Hawkeye. But it's not like the whole issue is like that. So I haven't actually gotten around to Seeley's run, but similar to that, this feels right back in line with an actual Nightwing comic. Basically, the Chuck Dixon era feels very much in vein with that. He's a very positive, optimistic character, and also you see here a lot of the characters directly related to Nightwing and everything like that. You get Zuko and you get Blockbuster. So I'm totally on board.
Yeah, a back to basics approach, but probably a different spin. And we already, at least with my experience over the past year of 2020, seeing how well Taylor gets the greater DC universe and the characters and relationships with all of them, it's kind of a match made in heaven. Though it is funny that he is writing Nightwing as he did kill him twice in two different, outside universe things, because he killed him in Injustice and he also killed him in Deceased, but now he's taking the reins on the go here. It's a funny thing, but like, dude definitely gets some from the get-go, which is really cool to see. I didn't have any like qualms or like nervousness the minute this team was announced. I was excited from the get-go on it. But I think we're all excited to see where it goes from here. And I'll throw it to Vince for our one lone X-Men book in X-Force.
Yeah, to kind of transition between the books, in fact, the one final thing I'll say on Nightwing, and this is kind of a good closing comment on most first issues from DC and Marvel. Recently, I feel like we've kind of dug on DC for this in a couple instances, but Marvel just as much. And I mean, this is my recurring thing on Spider-Man, is that I hope that the art team is consistent. And that brings me to X-Force number 18, obviously the long-running series by Ben Percy. And this issue, and I believe the next one or two, are drawn by Gary Brown instead of Joshua Cassara. The name I'm familiar with, but I can't tell you off the top of my head like something I know him from. And I got to be totally honest, the art is super rough in this issue. Some of this is probably the colors as well, but he's going for a Cassara lookalike. But literally a couple pages in, we have Sage at the bar drunk and Blob as the bartender, and both of their faces are just absolutely terrifying. And then we get kind of two major things in this issue. We get some trippy body horror and also some Jean Grey and Wolverine making out polyamory stuff. And both of those, kind of the romantic, angle as well as the kind of horrific and trippy stuff, they both just highlight the bad art here. As far as the thing I mentioned and the actual plot stuff, I don't like Jean, Scott, or Logan being in relationships in any combination with any of the other three characters. But oh well, whatever. Hickman's doing his thing. But the main plot here, it's continuing the story from the past issue where Quentin, Kid Omega, might have some messed up version of himself, killing people and like knocking them out, giving them strokes and things like that. And so this issue, it's him and Sage and I forget which cuckoo, the one he's dating. kind of trying to figure things out, and it's delving into the trauma of both Quentin, Sage, who's suddenly an alcoholic, and then Beast. Really, the only sequence of this issue where I felt that the art kind of fit were these flashback sequences of Beast. I mean, obviously, it's a dream sequence because he wasn't furry as a child, but it's like a child Beast who's getting like belittled in a school setting, and that was like the only sequence where I wasn't annoyed by the art the entire time.
Yeah, I thought this was Joshua Carsara when I first opened it because I was thinking, oh, I guess he just had an off one. This was, rushed. I was like, oh no, this is Gary Brown clearly trying to do a Joshua Cassara lookalike, and those faces are really bad. Like you said, particularly in the Lagoon bar scene with Sage. I like that Percy continues to blend his Wolverine run with this because we get references to the vampires he's fighting in the Wolverine book, which is good, but at the same time, like, I don't know. You say the relationship is Hickman's thing, but it's actually funny because he's the only one that's actually done anything with it, which is one thing I find interesting with the Gene and Scott thing. Outside of the one page description of when we got the rooms on the moon, it's really been Percy who's done anything with it, but still not any deep dives of it. I've said it before. I really don't care who's with who at this point because it's been 30 years off and on. So, whatever generation's going to have their more close net ties to it. I was never a huge X-Men fan beforehand, but like I said, we've talked about that before though. But looking at the issue, yeah, the Gary Brown art definitely, holds it back. I like last issue though, but this one was kind of a topsy-turvy down-haired thing. Maybe like I suddenly I don't care as much about the whole possible Quentin Carr murder monster thing. I don't know. I look forward to Recover though at like 19 and 20. This was an outlier issue to what we've been accustomed to.
Yeah, well,
But
the thing is, so I just by happenstance was updating my stupid spreadsheets today, and Gary Brown is he's on the next issue, but then is gone. So he's on 18 and 19. And then 20 is tying into this Hellfire Gala, whatever, which I don't fully understand yet. I don't know if it's going to be another 20-part crossover or if every book's just kind of tying in but not connected, which I think might be the case, and I'd be okay with that.
yeah, I think at least from what I understand from the Hellfire Gala thing, it seems like it's just going to be like a looming thing for a month. It's not like a crossover, which I think coming off after X of Swords, not even like 3 months later. Well, it is probably longer than 3 months, but it feels like right after that was over to do another 20-part thing would be a horrible idea. So I think it's just the next ancillary, whatever line thing they're dubbing for the X-Men. But we'll head to our next Infinite Frontier book, which was Justice League number 59 with Brian Michael Bendis. We gave this one to Dan. I think we're all going to have different views on this, but all probably meet in the same spot.
Yeah, so our next issue is Justice League number 59, written by Brian Michael Bendis, art by David Marquez, colors by Tamara Bonvillain. The issue opens to Black Adam facing off against this demon guy whose name is Brutus when the Justice League show up. And also, Superman has trunks. Holy crap, guys. He actually has trunks. So let the record be known there. Aquaman attacks him with a giant group of sharks, which is pretty cool. Cool to see that. Brutus does escape, though, through a portal. And the Justice League goes back to the Hall of Justice to find out where he came from. So they track Brutus's origin to Naomi. Of course, that makes sense, I think, because I think Brian Michael Bendis was writing Naomi as well. Where we see Black Adam show up to confront Naomi about this link between her and Brutus. I won't spend too much time on the backup Justice League Dark story here, but basically it ends with Merlin killing Elnara Rashtu, who I have no idea who that is. And that's all I care to share from that. So, yeah, I thought the art was pretty good here. Yeah, really not much else to report. It's kind of half the story. So,
well, Well, let's begin number one with not only did Superman have trunks in the book you read him in last week, but he's also had trunks again since 2018. So
Whoops.
I mean, it's worth appreciating.
It's worth appreciating, but I do have to say that he's had it for a while.
I don't care. I don't read a lot of books of Justice
2000.
League. Yeah, I don't read a lot of books of Superman, so sue me.
You read a book with him last week.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, Vince and I will get into it. Opening his book with the defense of the stupid identity reveal immediately murkies the water with the tone. Definitely for me, because it just feels like you're defending your bad decision. It's the first time we've seen Bendis on a team book in a while. But it's not. He's writing Young Justice, which I forgot about. So I guess to compare it, because I've always been the big proprietor that his New Avengers was just doing Justice League, so this might be good. Vince, you've always disagreed with me on that, but I've always felt his Avengers felt more like a Justice League than the Avengers did. But this was kind of a mess to the point where, like, I don't know what this, like, it's such a bad first issue comparing this to Nightwing, because nothing is really set up here in the more grander sense of, like, getting the league like shows up, they try to do something with Black Adam. Black Adam's just like, no, I got it. But also, like, at the same time, the Brutus character, like, stop giving Bendis new alien villains that all look the same, because this guy's just Rogol version 5. Like, that's the way he looks to me. Stop it. Just use Despero, use Amaze. Like, something else would have been much better for Black Adam to fight and tangle with than just new nameless villain that I'll forget about in 2 months. But I also felt the David Marquez art was kind of flat. Like, it was not up to par with the stuff I've seen from Ultimate Spider-Man. But that was, a couple years ago, and it's, different colorists, I think, too. It was just kind of a weird, like, issue where, like, I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it, but it was definitely more on the bad realm for me. Like, I think that you look at Bendis, like, this is a guy who's way past his prime, and his goose might be cooked, to me.
I didn't totally like it either, but I feel like I actually differ a lot in some of the things that Mike said. I think Nightwing was definitely a better first issue as far as a run, but I didn't think this was a bad first issue. The Marquez art I mostly liked. When the League actually shows up, and Dan, had his little weird thing about the trunks, but I thought Marquez's Superman looks really good. Though it's kind of interesting. He kind of draws like a little bit of like a thin Superman. Like it's almost like you would imagine this Superman to be like, early Metropolis, like just post Superboy or something.
Yeah.
But the only thing on the Marquez, like I thought the art overall was actually fantastic. The one thing is there was like one like 2-page montage sequence where like the art itself, I mean, it looked nice, but the kind of storytelling and the continuity of the page was slightly confusing to me. But that could just be me. My main thing here is like a lot of nitpicks, yeah, I feel like this. I mean, the take on this run is to try and make the Justice League more relatable and grounded, because that's essentially his reasoning for bringing in his weird, like, slightly meta defense of his Superman identity reveal. And then Green Arrow, as you might expect sometimes from Green Arrow's like, we need new blood in the League. And then, of course...
But my thing with that is Green Arrow hasn't been on the League in like 4 to 5 years, and he just shows up.
Yeah, well, that's the other weird part is like, it's very, I can't think of the right word, but it doesn't fully line up if you're a longtime DC reader, because it's like, obviously the League has not always been super diverse and representative. You could totally argue it never really was, but at the same time, like in a very grand view, like Hyper Time, which is also like, as far as I know from Death Metal, that is like technically the current continuity. Yeah. So like, they're like, we need new blood. It's always the same, like 7 of us or whatever. But like, as longtime DC readers and maybe with the Hyper Time stuff, like, there's been hundreds of members of the Justice League of all kinds and stuff. So but Bendis is giving it this attitude like it's this insular thing. But even within this, ignore that stuff. Even within this continuity, since the New 52, some of these members like Black Canary, I don't know that she's technically been on the main roster Justice League ever up until this issue within the New 52. I mean, I think she was on that, America book or whatever, but that doesn't matter.
Black Canary was on the team in JLI era.
I know, but I'm saying within the New 52. Like,
okay, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
Which is like maybe kind of sort of technically the continuity, but Black Canary, is like she's a new member in this issue technically, but Bendis is acting like she's not, but is also acting like we need new blood because it's always the same people, whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like I mean I don't want to get too deep into this, but I feel like a lot of times people said that Bendis' New Avengers, like on the surface level, people said that it was like Justice League because he brought in Spider-Man, because he brought in Wolverine and stuff like that, similar to like Morrison's take on Justice League, where it's like all the big guns. But the New Avengers, I mean, as far as kind of the premise for it, it was very much like, let's make the Avengers a little bit more relatable, a little bit more streetwise. Like that was the whole Luke Cage thing and everything, and Spider-Man really. And so it kind of feels like that's what he's doing here. And on top of that, like just the banter and the chemistry of these characters, the voices that he gives them, this kind of feels like a Marvel book to me. But maybe that's just because Bendis was Marvel for like 20 years.
Yeah.
And then I really don't understand DC's like position on Black Adam right now, because
I don't
Black
understand
Adam's
the position on Flash, because the Flash there was in a lab coat and had red hair, and that was not Wally West. So was that Barry Allen, and that was an error? I don't know, but I'll let you go on. Yeah, the Black Adam thing. To me at least, it seems that they're getting ready to do the tweener thing because The Rock's going to play him, and there's no way The Rock's playing a bad guy.
Yeah, but they're not like they're not consistent about it. It's like, yeah, they're not treating, when they run into Black Adam, they're not treating him as this like immediate threat villain. And it seems, as far as I know, that he's like, like an anti-hero type of dude, mostly sticking in conduct. So the superheroes show up and they're like, hey, this powerful dude who's like has some position of authority in a foreign country, or at least is very powerful, we're just going to be like, hey, shoo away, we'll take care of this. But then also like not calling for help. And it's a very similar position that the League was taking in Endless Winter, where, Flash showed up, or, Black Adam basically like knew all the secrets, like knew what was going on. And he's like, I could help you guys. And the Justice League's like, we don't want your help, even though like we're totally up past our heads. And he like helps out the Flash in like that one entire issue we read. And the Flash, wakes up and he's all rested and fed. And then he's like, oh, bye, Black Adam. I'm going to go help out. And I'm not going to ask you to come help with me. And it's very strange. Though, I mean, I think he's technically, he's joining this team. And then the big tease is Naomi is also joining this team. So we'll see. I think I'm going to continue this, but I don't really like it. And I'm not sure I'll stick around long.
Yeah, I came to the same conclusion as you, Vince. It's like, I don't really like this, but I'm curious enough to see where it goes, because I think like if I'm looking at what the flagship book of Infinite Frontier is, I mean, obviously I think it's whatever the Infinite Frontier, because we know that we had the Zero issue, but we'll have 1 and 2 solicited down the line. But I think it's more of a every few months kind of thing. I don't think it's a monthly, but I mean, I feel like I'm definitely wrong on that. But I mean, if you're putting Bendis on Justice League, that it gives it that oomph of the flagship book. But I don't think it's going to reach the highs of when New Avengers was the must-read title at Marvel to understand what was going to be happening in the Marvel Universe. I don't think that we're going to get that here. But, maybe we scratch that surface and we get, a light version of that. That would be nice. But I'll stick with it just to see what, in more of what Infinite Frontier is going to be. Hitting very, very brightly, like very lightly on Justice League Dark. I've been a Ram V fan for I think the last few months. He's my rising guy to follow, at least for me, because I going back to read more of his stuff. But yeah, this first chapter of the Justice League Dark backup felt a little rushy and convoluted a little bit. But maybe it gets better as it gets spread out. But also at the end of the day, why can't he just have a Justice League Dark book? That would be better. probably.
Yeah, it that didn't grab me at all. Basically, Dan was joking like there's not really much to say, and it's kind of how I felt. It didn't really grab me in. I'm worried if maybe he doesn't have enough pages.
Yeah. I also feel like I'm getting oversaturated on Jason Blood and Etrigan. It seems like Etrigan's everywhere and any ancillary thing I read this lately. So it's like I don't need to see him all the time. So whenever he shows up, I'm just like, oh, here we go again. Even though I like that character, it's just it's fatigue a little bit on that end. But I'll go into Catwoman. Catwoman number 29, which is Ram V and Fernando Blanco with Jordi Belair on colors. Joelle Jones still does covers for this book. Taking the time over the course of Future State, I did catch up on Ram V's Catwoman run. I think he took over at like issue 25 or 26. But I've been reading since the end of since Joker War was not plastered on the book as a tie-in. I've been reading, so I think it was like really only 2 issues. But I have this like semi-working knowledge of what's going on. Selina is living in Alley Town and building kind of her own empire there, and she's been tracking this drug that's been coming into the town. She has like a bunch of we saw this in the Future State issues, the Strays, kind of like the orphan kids. She kind of has that too here, but in a lesser degree of what it was in Future State. But there's this drug that's being infiltrated into Alley Town, and she's looking to get rid of it. And she also kind of is getting the help of this detective. He's named Detective Hadley, who she basically gave him the address of a shipping container where she like blew up the shipping yard and got rid of it. So like ancillarily working with this detective who pays her to visit, and she's like, "Yeah, I don't need your help, but I owed you because I got shot and you helped me. So this is our one clear thing that we're straight now." But last issue cliffhanger was these doctors had captured Poison Ivy and were making these drugs like out of her energy and I guess essence. So Selina's on the trail of that, where it takes her to the Riddler, and then they're attacked by this assassin who's got like these phasing powers and kind of looks like a beehive for a head a little bit. But they manage to escape and jump out like this window and then into the harbor where they're getting shot at. And when she drags Riddler to the shore, he reveals that he's been shot and they're bleeding out. So that's her cliffhanger. Definitely this crime vibe going on for Catwoman, and I liked it. I like Fernando Blanco's art. Jordan Blair's colors are good as always. Dan, you dipped your toe into this. I thought it was all right. I'll continue along with it, but yeah, it is interesting. I'll say this before I break it to both of us, but I think it's interesting that this book didn't start with a fresh start. We ended with the beginning of an arc, and then 2 months now getting back to it for the Infinite Frontier, which plays more into like the interesting strategy that DC's taking. Maybe this should have, been a fresh start with an arc and not like part 2, 3, which, with a 2-month hiatus. But Dan, how'd you do trying to navigate the waters?
Well, first off, like you said, the art I thought was amazing. The pacing, the panel layouts of this issue, I think were so on point for me. This issue really felt like it moved for me. So like that was very helpful. Yeah, I'm interested. I mean, obviously there's some stuff that I have to kind of like look into more to kind of get caught up on this, but no, I'm really interested, and I do appreciate that this is not like the Batman Catwoman store or book that is doing all this cheesecake with Selina. I feel like he does a good job. Yeah, he does a good job, like playing her up as a very attractive character, but like doesn't go over the top and make it too like in your face. So give him credit for that. But no, I'm definitely gonna keep reading this. Yeah, the colors, especially when they get into like the city and it's like all green and stuff. I just love that this looks so cool to me. So
yeah, the whole sequence where she's in the apartment with the Riddler and the fight goes down, like that's there's like the purples too and the deep highlights. Yeah, the Jordi Belair colors in this are great. The fight scenes are also really good. So I look forward to as we both navigate and figure out what more is going on in his run. And also, maybe he gets high on track because he took over and then immediately got sucked into the Joker War crossover, and now has a 2-month delay between his next story and because Future State happened. So I think it'll find its ground as we go deeper on it. But Ultramega.
Yeah, this was not a good number one. So we have, let me just pull up my little synopsis here. Our next issue is Ultramega number 1, written and drawn by James Herron. So our story opens to a man whose name I forget, it's escaping me. I think it's Justin or James, who cares? To a man who's given a crystal thing to help fight a virus. Turns out the man was a boxer who I guess lost a big fight, I guess became crippled or something, and then had no job. Like, we see him like as a janitor, and he gets his job taken away from him by a robot. So it's kind of like, I guess, placed in like a future society, I guess. He ends up fighting one of the virus creatures in the street, which makes him transform into this large creature that looks like the alien that gave him the power. And it's kind of funny, like after he destroys the villain, like he transforms back into a human, but like his head still stays like really big. So we get that whole thing, and he's also like naked. He loses all his clothes, kind of like the Hulk, I guess. Not really though. We then see that his first wife was infected with the virus, and then he meets up with his friends and he fights the virus in the city. And I will be honest, at this point, I kind of started skimming the second half of this book because I got super bored and confused and not interested in continuing to read it. I mean, I think Mike will say the art's cool. I could not get into this art. The fight with these like heroes and this virus gets pretty gory, and at one point the virus actually punches the guy's head off of him, and like it's just like a stream of blood. And you know, I'm not like queasy about blood, but I thought it was just a little too over the top for me. And then at the end, he kind of like turns like a robot version of like the alien, and then he has like an infinity gauntlet. What's going on? I mean, obviously, if I would have read the full issue, I would have been able to tell you, but I do not have any vested interest in staying on this book. This is a big stinker for me. Just something I just couldn't get into. So
I'll have to say, normally when we give you the reins to read the book and do the recap, you're the one that should be reading all of it.
I can't.
But
I couldn't read it. It was bad.
I did start skimming too, but you were the one this week who were like, "What books can I do?" And then he gave the one you didn't even read all of it. I just find that funny. But I'd have to say, if you were a little perturbed by the head getting punched off, you haven't read have you not started reading Invincible yet? Because that was outside of anything in the wheelhouse that you're going to see in that book.
Can't wait.
By the way, I mean, there are some scenes of Invincible that are very, very gory. And that this was, this was kind of adjacently in the wheelhouse of that, but there was a final twist here with the baby that was interesting, but like there wasn't enough here to keep me coming back. I just kind of felt was an incoherent mess of how we keep jumping from scene to scene and trying to find the grounding of it. But the fights looked cool.
Yeah, I read the whole issue. I don't necessarily fully disagree with you guys though. I was interested to read this because it's basically the concept, based on the title and obviously the premise. It's like Ultraman, but by an indie dude, also while Marvel is concurrentently publishing an Ultraman book. I think James Herron was also one of the artists on the original Deceased series. Like a really odd pick, but he's done. I think his main book is called Headlopper, I think, but he does other cool stuff. This was not totally up my alley. I mean, I like the idea, but I was not expecting the level of like kind of gore and stuff. I mean, it goes a little bit farther than Invincible, when the entire city's being like flooded with monster blood, so that then people are being drowned alive in blood, or then the blood like hardens, and they have to like dig through the hardened blood to try and find survivors. That's actually like a kind of neat idea that I don't think I've ever really heard about or seen in any other kind of story. But I'm not going to continue here.
Yeah. It was, I guess, thumbs down from all of us on that front. But
I mean, I appreciate. I will say, like, I think the art is
Yeah.
like on a technical level and like a visual and everything. I think the art is really, really cool.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I thought it was really good. And I thought the colors were good too.
Yeah,
But
it's just the story and certain parts of the art. It's just not my cup of tea.
I can say, Vince, if we're looking for kaiju fights next week, we get Godzilla versus Kong. So maybe
In a
we'll
comic.
no, the movie on
Oh,
HBO.
wow! I had no idea what was coming up.
Yeah, next week.
So you were talking about some shitty Legendary Comics tie-in.
No. The movie will be out next week, which maybe we'll lightly discuss it. We probably won't outside of a passing comment, but I'll go into Thor. Thor number 13, Donny Cates, Nick Klein. This is still, I think this is like part 4 of the story going on with Donald Blake at this point. Jane Foster successfully is able to recruit Odin to help get the rest of the Asgardian heroes to fight against Donald Blake. Sif and Beta Ray Bill are, they get joined by Doctor Strange and Lockjaw. Loki joins them too, and then they go and help Throg against Donald Blake. And then Thor, talking to the Ravens, sees that Thor, talking to the Ravens, sees that his body may not be freed from his realm inside the World Tree, but his spirit can. So he knows just the vessel to choose. And then, like, Odin's getting ready to wipe the floor with Donald Blake out until Thor's like, "Hey, I got this." And we see the spirit that's, his spirit that's inhabiting and getting to come back into the world is the Destroyer armor. So the Destroyer armor is going to beat up Donald Blake, and it looks like we'll wrap this up all in the next issue. More Donny Cates, fun, bombastic stuff, and Nick Klein's fun, awesome art. And also, Donny Cates gives us a reunion with Doctor Strange and Bats, the ghost dog, in a moment where he cusses out Loki, which was pretty good. So for there, I enjoyed it, but these Thor issues, I don't walk away having a lot to say on it. They're just really fun for me. But I'll go to Vince for our final book before the retro, which was the next color book for DC with Superman Red and Blue.
Yeah, so there are 5 stories here. I'm going to try and move through them somewhat quickly, because unlike when DC does those $10 100-page things, like, all the stories in here are worth commenting on. So we open with an opportunity for an Eminem lose yourself joke as Superman's palms are sweaty. And this is the story by John Ridley and Clayton Henry. I'm not sure how I feel about the idea that Superman barely ever sweats, but in my book, and what I wish this story would do, is it's better to just not think about Kryptonian anatomy too hard. When you start getting into like, oh, Superman doesn't get hurt because he has like a millimeter protective shield around his body, fueled by the sun. Like, just stop. And of course, there's the completely cursed Mallrats style argument about how does Superman have kids and stuff. But John Ridley then impresses the crap out of me by referencing and footnoting World's Finest issues 192 and 193, which are issues that DC has never reprinted. They put out a nice World's Finest hardcover a year or two ago, which picks up like just a couple issues after those ones. Because there was like a period where it was less Batman Superman team up and more Superman team up with Random. Just for some reason they did that for like a year. So this version of Superman also existed prior to the fall of the Soviet Union. So there's a little bit of continuity wrinkles. And I mean, this is like, the red and blue anthology. So who the hell cares? But this is a fantastic story. Basically, Clark Kent is going to interview a guy in a former like Soviet republic that committed all these war crimes. And in fact, while back in the day before the fall, Superman was doing something in the area, and due to kryptonite stuff, basically Superman became like a tortured prisoner of war. And it's a pretty conceivable, non-hokey way to show Superman at his lowest. Like, I bought it. And then later in life, returning to those memories, obviously it has real world parallels with a lot of Eastern Europe and things like that. I thought the Clayton Henry art was strong. He's not necessarily the artist that you'd expect on this kind of book, but here I thought it was good. And I'll get into a lot more art comments as we go along. The second story has art by Steve Lever, And the art was very nice. It's not quite the style that I expect from him recently. I'm thinking of like Superior Foes of Spider-Man or The Fix at Image with Nick Spencer, or I'm thinking of Jimmy Olsen with Matt Fraction. But this is not really. It doesn't really look like either of those. The story is basically an anti-drugs PSA mixed with dealing with grief and the message that Superman tries really hard, but he can't do everything. Unfortunately, I thought the writing in this story was very ham-fisted with super unnatural dialogue from Brandon Easton, kind of dragged the whole thing down. Third story is written and drawn by Wes Craig from Deadly Class, and this is the one that I finally felt took the art in a more experimental lane, as you would expect on this series, coming out of the legacy of Batman Black and White. And this is the first where the color really feels like fully baked into the concept. The other ones, when I'll get to this more and more, kind of feels forced. Now, this next story by Dan Waters and Danny, which are the team that did Coffin Bound, which I talked about on the show at some point, this takes the blue and red premise and just flips the table, where we actually start in black and white because a fifth dimensional imp, like Mr. Mixie Pitlick, has stolen color from the world. And the Superman has a conversation with him, and basically the imp's like, okay, I kind of screwed you over, and like I wasn't thinking too seriously. So here's this box with color, and you can decide what you want to do. And there's a real quandary on whether color is good or bad, because as color was wiped away, no one really remembers color or like fully understands it. So Superman is contemplating restoring it. There's like a little gag. There's an angle where like Batman is more resistant, which like kind of works out, dark and brooding, black costume and all that stuff. So Batman's like, color sounds kind of suspicious. And Lois kind of gives him some advice, and she's like, maybe just go one at a time. So then, tying into the title of the book, Superman selectively first brings back red and then blue, and it's explained well in a philosophical way. It's like, red is the color of love, but it's also blood and violence and anger. And, blue is calming and it's music, but it's also sadness, blah, blah. But if anything on this story, it's a really genius idea, but at the very end here, you almost wish that this was in a less restrictive anthology, where this could go a little bit further. This could be a whole issue, a whole one-shot, and further colors could follow. Danny's art is good, and it's better than that weird Gotham by Gaslight story from earlier in one of those giant anthologies. But her style and the lack of color makes Superman look like he has like this combed back, undercut haircut. And there aren't really any like super jaw-dropping visuals, but as the colors integrated, there's some really cool moments here. Now, the final story is the one that I have, and I'm kind of the most critical on, and then where I'm going to wrap it all together. So Marguerite Bennett here and Jill Thompson. It's a pretty fun tale of Clark's first day of school in kindergarten. And the writing from Bennett for young Clark, it feels really off to me. Granted, it's very hard to write kids. I definitely don't think I could do it, let alone their internal thoughts, which is a whole other level. But this story in particular, getting to the art side, gives me an excuse to get to my main criticisms of this entire issue and potentially the whole series. Because I swear to God that this story does not follow the rules of the color palette. It's watercolor style, and there are elements here, like there's a kid who pops up, and there's certain elements where I swear to God there's green in this story, or some kind of variation that's not. It's close to like a gray kind of color, but there's some kind of color in there that is not just black, white, red, and blue. And even if it's like technically follows the rules, to our eyes it doesn't. So like it effectively doesn't follow the rules. But ultimately, I kind of think the entire premise of this series doesn't work. And maybe this is crackpot theory, but color printing is built on CMYK, which obviously those don't. That's cyan, magenta, yellow, and key black. And obviously, comics were born in an era, back in the 30s and 40s, of primitive printing, cheap paper, etc. So the four-color identity is strong, in comics culture, in the visual, language of comics. And this book just locks away one of those, but by the nature of color, you can still express things very vividly by taking those others and mixing them, which is basically what this watercolor story gets away with. And you're giving yourself tons of loopholes to cheat with. So ultimately, with the exception of Wes Craig's story, everything here to me either feels like it's missing something, or it's just awkwardly forced, or it's almost cheating. And at some points, like the first story from Clayton Henry, which I thought was actually pulled it off fairly well, that one in particular, you almost, like, if you looked at it real quick, you almost feel like you're reading like one of those old 3D comic gimmicks from the 80s or something. And also with this issue in particular, I felt like the writing is being leaned on more than the art, which is not what I want from these books. Even when they're all strong and unique artists, besides Clayton Henry, who's kind of, no offense, he's not like the most experimental artist, even though I liked his story. But then they're leaning on the writing, but then at least two of the stories, I thought the writing was weak. So I'm kind of like, it might be above, the Wolverine book, but it's definitely below the latest Batman Black and White. Next issue, I'm excited for Dennis Cowan and Ben Panosian on stories, but that's like 2 of 5, so we'll see. I think I'm going to read it because I still like kind of the experimental nature of it.
Yeah, I liked pretty much every story in here except for that last one, which, yeah, that one was... I saw green in there. I'm sure it was in the way it was put together. It wasn't intended, but that's the way it looked. Also, young Clark looked weird. Yeah, I agree. The last story was a little up. I like the one where he meets the kid that who got his hand crushed years later. I thought that was good, but everything once, like Batman Black and White, we've kind of seen these series stories with Superman before, but now it's in a different gimmick, and it's the first issue where it's different because it's not just black and white. You're playing with different values, and how much you want to go with the blacks, but also you have the red and blues in there that you're gonna see how you sprinkle them in. I think, I at least I had this. Why don't they do just Superman Black and White? Well, I think this kind of proved why that wouldn't work to me, because the one where the fifth dimensional imp stole all the color, which I think it was Mixed-Expedalic, but I'm not sure. I don't think it was. Batman shows up for a second. Batman looks great, but Superman doesn't. And everyone around him doesn't look great in the black and white. Until the color got in there, I was like, oh, okay. And maybe it's just in my head, when I see Superman and it's not colored, it doesn't look as right. Well, while Batman is always more of a darker character in the suit, it's usually a black cape and cowl and a gray suit. So if it's black and white, it looks, enough the same where it's familiar and you get past it. But when that suit's not blue and that cape's not red, it's going to look a little odd. And you don't need the yellow belt and the inside yellow on the symbol to make it look, not familiar. But yeah, it's a weird thing to play around with. I liked all the stories here. I thought the John Ridley story was really good. It's another great John Ridley short. He's like 3 for 3 on these, outside of the one with the next Batman, because I think he had a different one as well. But outside of that, but man, get more John. I want to see more John Ridley stuff later this year. But overall, I think it's good. I'll stick with it. I'm wondering how the Wonder Woman what is it? Wonder Woman Black and Gold, how that one's gonna function with the how much are they gonna lean into the gold versus the yellow is something, but we'll get there down the road. But overall, I don't think it was as good as any issue. I think this was better than the last issue of Batman Black and White, because I wasn't super hot on that one. But yeah, this is better than the issues of the Wolverine story, the Wolverine series.
Yeah, I mean, you guys pretty much touched on a lot of stuff. Definitely liked the one with all the colors missing at the beginning. I like that story. The one with the little child in the fire. I thought that was pretty cool too. They're tough colors to work with, I feel like, and I feel like every story kind of uses them in different ways. Like, using blue for skin tones or using red for skin tones. It all depends on the mood. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's so many like books out there that are like have like a color after them, like
like a color gimmick seems to be the thing for 2021.
Yeah, and I don't know. I just feel like it's if you do it so much together like this, people start to catch on, and it's kind of like, okay, we've seen this before. I don't know. I mean, the
Yeah,
stories were good.
if DC wanted to expand it, I know Mike made the point that maybe Superman doesn't work quite as well in black and white compared to Batman, but if DC really wanted to expand this, I almost wish that they would do what Marvel's doing and just stick to the same format. Like, just give us Superman black and white and Wonder Woman black and white instead of trying to make them different and get cutesy with the colors, because I don't know that it really works.
Well, I think Dan hit a great nail on the head here too, with the way that you see some stories use skin tones for blue, but some stories don't use skin tones at all. And with red and blue, you have a wide range of different shades and values of those two different colors. So like, to just distill what is red, what is blue, you're going to get different shades and values and colors and everything in every different story. While it seems to be consistent with Batman Black and White, the black is always going to be the same black and the white's always going to be the same white. So you don't really get a difference of the shading in Batman Black and White. Well, here, like we have light blues, we have strong, bold primary blues. There's not a lot of navy in this one, but I'm sure something to play around with in later iterations. If you ever set a story at night, you can use a navy for your setting. But yeah, it's a different experiment that I'm waiting to see how it's going to go further down the line. Like, I'm still going to read probably every issue in this series because the stories have been good, but it is just something to look and see how they're going to experiment with it overall. But,
yeah, one thing I want to say, you kind of made me think of something with John Ridley, especially this story where he's like giving footnotes to random world's finest issues from like the early 70s, and then obviously I've been reading other history of the DC universe. This is really reductive, but like John Ridley kind of gave me Christopher Cantwell vibes, where it's like a guy coming in from Hollywood, but like really knows his stuff and/or is getting dirty in the research, and is telling very compelling stories that you might expect from someone like outside of comics, but is executing them really well and is bringing kind of the homework with him. So those two people that I'm really excited about. One of them mainly at Marvel and one mainly at DC.
Yeah, which I want to see more from what really does. I'm excited to see what DC uses him on and puts him on outside of as we further his level here, because it looks like he'll have other projects outside of just the next Batman, which is exciting. But I'll go into our final book, which is our retro in Doctor Strange number 52 from April of 1982. This is Roger Stern and Marshall Rogers, Terry Austin on the inks. So following their previous adventures in World War II London, Strange, Clea, and Morgana Blessing have returned to the present, but Morgana has fallen into a coma where her life force is being drained. And then we get some romantic drama with Clea basically leaving Strange as she saw into Morgana's psyche and was shown that her love for Strange was more than hers, and in that time she will eventually be with Steven, so she leaves him. It kind of, I don't know how to feel about that. It's kind of weird, but then Morgana's body starts, firing bolts of magic around them, which prompts Strange to go inside her mind to figure out what's happening here. And there he's met with Nightmare, who informs Strange that this coma has wrapped Morgana's soul, and the trip to the past caused a rift where now her soul is reverting back to its earliest incarnation, and it will cause a chain reaction, destroying all of humanity, Nightmare included. So he's like, hey, Dr. Strange, you want to go fix this? So he's transported to different times. He goes to the Spanish Inquisition, where Strange has to find her, whatever soul that woman that was inhabiting at that time, but gets sidetracked, and on escaping, he's got to escape this prison after he was poisoned by the woman that he thought was Morgana. And he's like, oh, wait, it's not going to be the same woman. It could be different in these different times. So he has to now process that. So then he gets further thrown into the past to the Yucatan Peninsula, in 800 AD. Meanwhile, in reality, doctors are overseeing Morgana and seeing that her condition's worsening, fearing brain damage. So Strange is now working against the clock, and then also all of humanity might die if he's getting out of time for how further they can go back. So it's kind of a fun thing here. We are in the middle of an arc, so I feel like we're not getting as much of it out of it as we could, but you see a lot of Ditkoism in Marshall Rogers here, and that's the reason why I chose it. Is I like Marshall Rogers as Batman, so I want to check out Marshall Rogers as Doctor Strange. A lot of the layout's similar to what I've seen on his Batman stuff, and his expressive faces, the way he composes pages, like the close-up shots of someone's face with another drawing inside, kind of a Neil Adams thing, but something he adopted as well. But this makes him ultimately perfect for Doctor Strange. I felt every page and panel is going to have his signature, expressive nature there and energy to the piece. So I mean, I love it. Happy I went with this. I think I'd known Rogers had drawn some Doctor Strange, and I think maybe we looked at it a previous issue before, but I'm not entirely sure. Maybe that was one of the Paul Smith issues. I can't remember. It was like an early episode, so if you want to go back and figure it out. But it was like maybe one of our first retros before Dan was doing the show consistently. I think it was still when it was me and Vince. But always a pleasure to see more of Marshall Rogers art in any capacity I can look at it. Love the cover too. It's such a good cover. I could have gone with the easy alternate choice for this month. Daredevil 181 was out that same month, and as a huge Daredevil fan, it looked like it was an easy one to choose. But overall, like, we've all read that issue, and I found that there wouldn't be much for us to really add in a discussion just at the end of a show on the retro book segment. Maybe in the future, if we ever do a Daredevil deep dive thing, it'd be something to talk about. But ultimately, I am happy I went with this choice because it was a fun thing to look at the Marshall Rogers art, at least. The story, it's got it. Doctor Strange has this thing where it's like the things he's fighting are like the world. The stakes get so high that it kind of starts being semi-hilarious, where there's not other heroes built into it. So this one woman's mind, where if he doesn't stop and correct things, is going to destroy all of humanity. It escalates very quickly, but it's still cool all at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I really like this issue. The way that Rogers draws Strange, I mean, his face is just, I don't know, something about it just feels very like stoic, and yeah, it still really has like a lot of character, and yeah, this is just a crazy issue, right? There's so much stuff going on here, like you said, and like it's just funny because like it's just like the rest of the Marvel universe is just so blissfully unaware of like what Strange has to do to keep their reality in check. So it's just, yeah, this is exactly what you expect from a Doctor Strange book. And the only little gripe I have is I know this might be me just being a little petty, but I just feel like there's just a lot of speech going on in this book, and I know this is from '82, so it's getting there in terms of like more modern books, but there's a lot of explanation and thought bubbles, and I don't know. I guess thought bubbles was kind of like the progression from narration, so now it's just I don't know. That's the only gripe I have, but otherwise a great issue.
No, I thought there is a little heavy narration too, but maybe it's because like I just want to look at the Marshall Rogers art and it's clouded by like 15 boxes sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah, this is good. I don't have that much more to add. I always find it interesting when, I mean, I'm sure I do it too, but I usually, when I pick my retros, I like dig real deep and try and figure out just because I'm crazy. So it's always interesting to me when we end up picking something that's like technically in the middle of an arc, because it was never, back then it was never as obvious. And, on that note, like, you can tell that this is in between things. You can tell that things continue in the next issue and that it picks up a little bit from the previous. But you can also totally read this on its own. And I wish all comics were like that.
Well, this is in the shooter era at this point, right? Where it's that mandate of every comic should be able to read standalone, but
something like that. I mean,
every comic, someone's first comic, so at least make characters known in the first. Yeah. We're all kind of reiterating what we know what the statement, but off the top of my head, I can't exactly remember what the mandate commandments were.
Yeah, no, my asterisk there was going to be that, like, shooter may have set the rules, but not everyone didn't always follow them, and he probably broke them himself. But as a general idea, he had something similar to that. I'm pretty certain this is definitely the shooter era. Yeah, this is, and I'd agree with, as a general rule, there can be exceptions to stuff, but I agree with that general idea.
And I have to say, normally when I think we always try to look for a number one or something where we try not to read something in the middle of an arc. When we look for the retro, but overall, like I think we have had success of things in the middle of arcs that
Yeah, I think there's appeal, and it's always interesting both ways. In fact, if anything, I would say sometimes it's too easy. It's a little lazy sometimes when we always pick number ones. Just because, especially when we're looking at these older eras, it is really interesting to jump into a run, in the middle, or jump into an arc in the middle, and see how well you can float.
Yeah, well, I'd at least have to say for me, like, there's been a couple times where we've done that, where I'm like, wait, I want to, I want to go back and read more of this run because like I haven't highlighted enough. So I think you get a best of both worlds scenario with the way we choose it, and this is one of those ones where it's like, at least knowing for me, because I know not a lot of this Roger Stern Strange stuff is collected, it just keeps making me want Marvel to reprint it, and I think hopefully maybe around the time of Doctor Strange 2 will get to that point, which will be nice. But we've had those moments of like, at least for me, where we read a book in the middle of a run on the retro segment and was like, I want to check out more of this. But overall, let's do picks of the week. I'll do mine right off the top back. It's Nightwing, hands down. It's Nightwing.
I think I'm there with you. It's definitely not X-Force. I'm going to give it to Nightwing.
Just to be different, I'll go Catwoman.
Okay, I mean, just to be different, but I mean, Nightwing would probably be your 2 then.
Yes.
It's not Ultramega. We know that.
Hell no. Put that in the trash.
That's all we had for this week. Enjoy the college basketball. Stay safe out there. Peace.